All right. The booth says we're good to go. Good morning, everybody. We're going to be in Deuteronomy chapters 5 and 6 today. So if you want to open your Bibles, make your way there. Just to start with, I need to say thank you. Thanks for letting me be gone last week. Thanks to Randall for filling in. And I kind of looked over what his notes he had left for me and said he kind of covered 1 through 4. And we're going to move right on in fairly quickly to 5 and 6. Some of this is going to be pretty familiar. Of the places of Deuteronomy that get referenced a lot, these are two that we read over and over. It's going to be familiar stuff as we read it. And I just wanted to say, I hope that we're enjoying this study. I am. And I know that's all one-sided, right? But I'm enjoying it. I hope everybody else is. And I know it's kind of a one-sided class too, because it's very difficult to do a discussion. Number one, in here as we're all spread out, and two, if we're live streaming, it's hard to have that dynamic work. So it's just kind of been, you have to sit and listen to me drone on and on. But I'm trying. I hope that we're finding it exciting. I don't remember who said this first. I do remember hearing it, that they said that it's a sin, if it's not, it should be, to bore people to death with the greatest story ever told. Right? So we want to try to make sure we're working our way through this. Deuteronomy chapter 5, I want to start by just reading the first section, actually down through verse 21, if you want to follow along. This is Moses summoned all Israel, and he said to them, "Hear, O Israel, the statutes and the rules that I speak in your hearing today. You shall learn them and be careful to do them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us in Horeb. Not with our fathers did the Lord make this covenant, but with us, who are all of us here alive today. The Lord spoke with you face to face at the mountain, out of the midst of the fire, while I stood between the Lord and you at that time, to declare to you the word of the Lord. For you were afraid because of the fire, and you did not go up into the mountain. He said, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, or your male servant or your female servant, or your ox or your donkey, or any of your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Honor your father and mother, as the Lord your God commanded you, that your days may be long, and that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder, and you shall not commit adultery, and you shall not steal, and you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, and you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, and you shall not desire your neighbor's house, his field, or his male servant, or his female servant, his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Okay, again, very familiar. And I know to the adult class that was meeting here in the auditorium before the pandemic, very familiar, because you all were in Exodus and had just gotten through, I believe, the 10 Commandments, had been working through those. And not just that, but Randall had a sermon series with each one of the 10 Commandments that went through on those. So we have those repeated here again. Now, I don't mean to throw anybody off. I don't intend to spend a lot of time digging into the 10 Commandments, because I think that's something we're fairly familiar with, right? It doesn't mean that we don't appreciate them. It doesn't mean that we think they're worthless. I heard a study one time. It was actually based out of a book that This premise is that everyone lies, cheats, and steals. Right? That's the premise of the book, that everybody does it. Right? And I don't know if that seems kind of sobering, but it says everybody does that. And the guy who was reviewing the book said, we used to think that we would lie, cheat, and steal as much as we thought we could get away with. He said, but it turns out we're really bad at guessing what we can get away with, and if you don't believe that, you just look at the prisons, right? He goes, so it's really come down to people lie, cheat, and steal as much as they think that they can and still be able to consider themselves a good person. And so they had this test of college students, and so they were talking about cheating on college exams. And they had one group come in and they had them write something, copy a paragraph of something, I don't even remember what that was, but the other group came in and they asked them to write down as many of the 10 Commandments as they could remember, right? They wanted them to come in, they wanted them to write these down, as many as they could remember. Didn't matter if it was one, didn't matter if it was all of them, just whatever they could remember of them. And then they went and took the test, and they observed them. And the ones who had to spend the time writing the 10 Commandments, the cheating rate was way down compared to the others, because somewhere these are ingrained, that these are important, that there's somebody watching, there's something going on, some way we're supposed to live. So we are going to talk about some of the 10 Commandments just kind of as we kind of work our way through this chapter. But before that, there's some other things that I think that we need to see. And again, like I said a while ago, this is one-sided, so what I think we need to see, that's sorry. Anyway, that's kind of how we work it. The first thing is right off the bat, one of the first things that Moses says, that these are the commandments, these are the statutes, these are the rules that God has commanded you. You need to be careful to learn and to do. All right? To learn and to do. Those things do not get separated. I've heard this and I understand where it's coming from, and I don't disagree with the premise. The premise is that when it comes to Christianity, it's a thinking religion. Yes, right? We can think about things like what Paul talks about in Philippians 4. Remember the list, whatever things are good, whatever things are noble, praiseworthy, and he goes to that list, think on these things. We think about Paul saying, you need to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. There's thinking involved. Right? But what Moses is saying, it's not enough for you to learn these and just learn them. There's doing that goes with them. You learn and you do. I think, again, of Paul, I think it's Galatians chapter 6, where he says, and let's not grow weary. He doesn't say, let's not grow weary in remembering the things we should do. Right? He said, let's not grow weary in doing good. Right? So there is doing that goes along with it. Jesus hits this in the Sermon on the Mount. Those are the ones who hear these words and put them into practice. So we are a doing religion, right? Christianity is doing. But it's doing based on what we learn about who God is. It's doing based on learning about God's characteristics, his demands, what he expects, and we do in that way. Sometimes it's learning by doing, right? Sometimes we have to do, and then we go, whoops, we messed that up. We got to do it again. I think about our kids learning to walk. We don't sit down with them and go through all the physics of what's involved every time they pick up their foot and put the other one down. They don't read this and go, okay, now I understand what all my muscles do. We set them up against something and we say, come on. And they try, right? And then they fall down and we pick them up and we dust them off and they try it again. Some of that is what we do, right? We're going, this is the way that we need to go. And sometimes we try it and we fall down. And somebody needs to be there to pick us up and to dust us off and say, okay, let's try that again. And then there's other things that we're going to need to be a little bit more educated before we just jump in and do. My oldest son's in med school. I want him to know what he's going to do before he decides to do it, right? If he's going to prescribe me medication, he needs to know what that's going to do before he goes, hey, just try this and see what happens, right? And if it doesn't work, we'll try something different, right? If it doesn't kill you, we'll try again, right? So it's that kind of thing. It's this idea of what Moses is saying is this is not just something that's theoretical. This is not just something that we're going to know and we're going to think about, but then we're going to act however. Because that almost speaks to a heresy that came along later, where it says, the spiritual is good, it's the material that's bad. As long as you're thinking the right thing, your body can do whatever it wants to. And that doesn't seem to line up. Okay? So this idea of learning and doing, right? It's been several months ago now. It just kind of came to me several months ago now that the guy from Harding, Dr. Richardson, was here, and he talked about that cycle of come and see and go and do. Right? He goes, and we come and see and come and see and come and see, and he goes, we've got it to hear. He goes, we need to go and do. Right? It's all part of that cycle. It's all part of that living. The next thing that I want us to notice is what Moses says here, and this little word gets repeated a bunch. Right? The statutes, the rules that I speak in your hearing today. I believe that one of the books I was looking at in conjunction with this study, and I believe that they're looking at the Hebrew, how the Hebrew is translated here. But this little word today, they said, is repeated almost 100 times in Deuteronomy. Now I counted, I went back and counted just through the English Standard Translation, and it's 58 that's translated in the English Bible today. Deuteronomy is a forward-looking book. All right? Think about where Israel is. They're standing at the border. They're on the other side of the Jordan. They're going to go in and take the land that God's going to give them. And so we'll see over and over, when you come into the land, this is what you do. When this happens, when God gives you this is what you do. But today is the day you decide to do it. Right? There's an urgency to doing it today. Moses is saying the words that I'm speaking to you today, those of us who are alive here today, need to make the decision we make the decision today of where we go tomorrow. Right? There's an urgency to it. We can't wait. It's about being present. Right? That's what we have, and that's all we have, is where we are today. I think it's James that says, why is it that you say we're going to go and we're going to spend a year in this place and we're going to buy and sell and do such and such, and he goes, think about this another way. If God wills, that's what we'll do, because today's what you have, right? And so the decision, and Moses will urge this over and over to Israel, the decision to do what it is that needs to be done when you get into Canaan is made today. And I think that doesn't that kind of speak to us some? Today, we make the commitment to do what it is that needs to be done. Today, we make the commitment to follow Jesus. It's not like, tomorrow I'll do that. I mean, that's my diet plan, by the way. Right? I'll start that tomorrow. Right? But it's today's the day we make the decision. All right? So there's that one. The next thing I want to draw our attention to before we get too far away from it is this. And I think this is, again, is very important, and I think it's somewhat confusing just to start with as we listen to what Moses has to say before he even begins the Ten Commandments. God made a covenant with us at Horeb. Not with your fathers, but with us who are alive here today. Okay, if we think about the timing just for a minute. 40 years has passed since they left Sinai. All of those who were 20 years old and up, just shortly after leaving Sinai, are dead. Right? Because they've refused to go in. You will die in the wilderness. All of those 20 years old and up. Now a new census has been taken at the end of Numbers. These are new people. Many of them were never at Sinai. Not there. Now, it doesn't mean they don't know what happened. I'm certain that this has been told over and over and over. You know, there's important events in our life that we tell over and over, and stories that we like to tell over and over. My dad got a speeding ticket one time. You remember that? Yeah. Stacy rode with him sometime, and he would tell her that every time that he went. Right? There's these events that we go, this happened. I can't imagine that seeing God show up on the mountain in fire and smoke and earthquake and hearing his voice doesn't make that list as you begin to tell how it is we got here. Right? So they know this. But I find it interesting that Moses says, not with them, not with that generation that's gone, but with you, with us. A couple of things. If they know what happened at Sinai, they also know what happened in the wilderness, right? Of the death of all of these people. I think that may be Moses' way of saying, if God did it to those he saw him face to face there, he will do it to you too. Right? The promise that God made to them is the promise that God made to you, good or bad. Coming into the land or dying in the wilderness. He made it with you. The other thing that I really appreciate a lot about this is that the time spent with God at Sinai was not a one-time event. Not just one thing that could be talked about, stories be told about, and forgotten about. It was formative for who these people are, as if they were there. They are part of this same covenant. I don't really like to spend time in a book and then jump automatically to another one somewhere else, but I'm going to do that right now because I think this ties in very well, and I think it makes a really good application for us. There's a passage, a section of the letter to Romans, chapters 9 through 11, that talks about Israel. What's going to happen to Israel? Then there's a lot about Israel's salvation, Israel's history, where are they going to end up? And there's a lot of people debate what it is that Paul's trying to get at. In chapter 11, he makes this point. When he's talking to the Gentiles. We have this tension that's there in Rome. The Jews had been expelled, now they're back. And so we have this Jew-Gentile tension. And for a lot of this, it seems like, depending on kind of the angle that we look at Romans, that Paul is being a little bit more direct to the Jewish people, right? I mean, you just can't come back and demand these things of the Gentiles. We're all one. And he hits the Gentiles too. But here's where he really hits the Gentiles with this. He says, the people of God, it's like a big olive tree. We have this big olive tree. And some of the branches of that olive tree were broken off because of unbelief. But you, wild olive shoots, God has grafted in to this. You're a part of this big tree, this big covenant people of God now. And then he says, the roots don't exist because of you. You exist because of the roots. All right? There's a lot to that. There's a lot to that we need to think about, and I think that's one of those things that we need to remember. I'm going to get in trouble, so get ready. The good news is I took all the songbooks out. You can't throw those at me anymore. Right? If you haven't seen in the worship bulletin, you will see it in there, that in about 2 weeks, this auditorium is going to look completely different than it did. Right? That means some of the old is going to go, and some of the new is going to come in. That does not mean, and should not mean in any way, that we say we don't care about what happened here before. Are you with me? This church is here, planted in this place, because of the dedication and the commitment and sacrifice of a group of people about 40 years ago. We don't forget that. The furnishings may change. Differences, there may be different things as we walk into the building, but it's not because we say, well, listen, whatever was back there before doesn't matter. It matters a lot. We are who we are in Bella Vista, a large part because of those people 40 years ago who said, this is where we want to plant. And we honor that. Right? What Paul was saying to the Gentiles is, you can't just tell these Jewish people that they're no good anymore, because God brought you into something much bigger than yourself. And you're dependent on them, on what happened at Sinai, and what happened in the call of Abraham. That we are all part of something far greater than just us. I just the idea of the tree is good. I really like the idea. I had a guy tell me this one time. He was talking about if you look at this like a stream, that this stream that runs all the way through. It begins, in Eden. It begins with God's promise in Genesis 3. It begins with the call of Abraham. It continues on through Israel, all the way. It's because it's through Israel that the Messiah comes. And we are now in part of that same stream. And that we move along with that, and we look to where this is going. It started way before us, and it will end after us. Right? But it is ours to find our place in that and be appreciative of the ones who've come before. Is that good? I think when I read this and was thinking about this, I'm just going, this seems to be a great time just to bring that up. Of going, this is not saying, okay, we changed the pulpit, so we must not like the people who were here before. That's not the case at all. One of these days, hopefully it's a while, but one of these days, I'll be dead and gone, right? And whoever comes, and we'll be gone. And whoever comes behind us will make changes. They don't need to hang on to this because we set it up in 2020, right? But we do need to appreciate the things that have gone on before that make us who we are. And it's not this, and it's not the furnishings, right? All right. If I had a little soapbox, I'm gonna build one so I can again stand on it and then get off my soapbox. I'm gonna do that one of these days. Okay, so now I do want to look at, before we get completely away from them, I do want to look at some of the Ten Commandments, just kind of walking through them a little bit. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the way Deuteronomy is set up like a treaty. We see this really plain right here in this little section of the Ten Commandments, right? I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. The introduction to who is speaking and who is offering the terms. With that is the history. I brought you out of that land of Egypt. Now, here are the stipulations. And he begins that list. You will have no other gods before me. And I know most of us know this. That doesn't mean we have a chart of gods and he's at the top. What that means is you will have no other gods in my presence. He is God alone. There's nothing else. And then, just so we're clear on that, he'll say, so this is what that looks like. You will have no idols. And then the section that I think that we need to remember, I hope that we remember and commit to memory, is what God says about his own character, right, in verses 9 and 10. I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands, or in some cases it may be translated to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. We talk about jealousy a lot of times as a very negative thing, and it can be that way. But sometimes I think we also get jealousy and envy confused, and they're two separate things. They are a little bit related, but they are separate. Envy is, I really like that mask that you've got, and I wish I had it and you didn't, right? And I'm envious of what it is that you have that I don't have, and I would like to have that. That's a part of it. Jealousy is, that is mine, and I don't want to lose it. These are God's people. Humanity itself is God's people, but if you'll remember back at Sinai where he says, I chose you out of all the earth, and the whole earth is mine. You are mine. And I hope we hear it. I hope we hear the love, the concern, the desire that God has to be with his people. And we're going, I will not have you run after somebody else after everything I've done. Right? And we see this. It's not God sitting on high going, okay, now here are you people, you're going to worship me because I said so. It's God saying, I have rescued you because I love you and I don't want to lose you. You do not run after anything else because of what I've done. All right, the next thing that I want us to talk about is maybe the longest section of the Ten Commandments is listed in Deuteronomy, has to do with the Sabbath. And if you go back and you read Exodus chapter 20 of the regulations on the Sabbath, they're also rather lengthy, not huge, but we'll find that if you read Exodus 20 and you read Deuteronomy chapter 5, there are two different reasons given for keeping the Sabbath. In Exodus 20, for in 6 days God created the heavens and the earth, and he rested on the seventh day, and he set aside the seventh to keep it holy, and so will you. That's a rough paraphrase, but that's the reason. It ties all the way back to God's work in creation. In Deuteronomy, because I, the Lord your God, brought you out of the land of Egypt. You were slaves in Egypt, and I rescued you with a mighty hand and outstretched arm, so you will keep the Sabbath. This idea of Sabbath, and I hope I haven't beat this to death. I know we've talked about it before. This idea of Sabbath is the idea of stopping and celebrating and resting in the fact that God is our creator and our deliverer. For Israel, it was a time when you rest. He gives them rest. Not just you, but I want your livestock to rest. I want your servants to rest. I want the people, the strangers who live among you, to rest too. But it was a rest with a purpose of saying, okay, God, we're going to take our hands off the wheel and understand that you created this world and you've delivered us. And we can trust you to operate it. Okay, I have a real problem with that, okay? I don't mind telling you. Right? I have a real problem of thinking that if I don't do it, it doesn't get done. But then I go to bed, and I wake up and I find that the world turned just fine without me. You know? And it was probably in better hands when I wasn't doing anything with it. And that's this idea of Israel. This is their difference. This is one of their differences that they're going to have. And I hope it's one of the differences that we have, where we take time and we say, okay, we trust that you have this. You've done it. You've set this all up. You've made it. And not just that, not that you just make it and just leave it, but you've made it and you have delivered a people out of it. We can trust you to handle this. Sabbath is a big deal. Sabbath is a big identity thing for the Jews, and we'll see that when you come to the life of Jesus. The way that they have safeguards around this and how it's supposed to be done, because they see it, they understand it as big. I hope, again, we don't have any direction in the New Testament that says, okay, every Friday at sundown we want you to stop and we want you to pick up again Saturday at sundown. We don't have that anymore, a specific day. But I think we still see the whole principle there of going, you still rest in the fact that God made you and God delivered you, and that you trust God to take care of you and take care of your things and take care of the things around you, that you trust him to do this. All right? Okay. Wow, I'm getting behind. So I do want to, I want to just kind of stop there. The rest of these, the rest of the Ten Commandments, again, we know pretty much what we're talking about, right? Honoring your father and mother, respecting the name of God, that's a big one, right? If you have 10 words to say, and this is one of them, it's got to be important, right? So that's got to be important, but then it's how we relate to God, how we relate to one another. And Moses will go on in the rest of chapter 5 to say, and you remember how you were afraid when God showed up. You remember how you asked me to go and talk to God for you because you didn't think you could stand it. You were afraid you would die. And that fear that you had of God there at Sinai was moving you into obedience, and may you do this always. Right? May you always have that fear and reverence of him and respect what he's done and obey his commandments. All right? Now I want to move to chapter 6 before it gets away from us, because chapter 6 is another one of those places that we read from relatively often. Has one of the big tenets of Christianity and Judaism in it, what they call the Shema, is here. This is the commandment, the statutes, and the rules that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, that you may do them in the land to which you're going over to possess it, that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your son and your son's sons, by keeping all his statutes and commandments which I command you all the days of your life, that your days may be long. Hear therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, maybe you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you in a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. Shall teach them diligently to your children. Shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. You'll bind them as a sign on your hand. They shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. And when the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give you, with good and great cities that you did not build, houses full of all good things that you did not fill, cisterns that you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees that you did not plant, and when you eat and are full, then take care, lest you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. It is the Lord your God you shall fear. Him you shall serve, and by his name you shall swear. You shall not go after any other gods, the gods of the people who are around you. For the Lord your God is in your midst is a jealous God, lest the anger of the Lord your God be kindled against you, and he destroy you from off the face of the earth. You shall not put the Lord your God to the test as you tested him at Massah. You shall diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God, his testimonies and his statutes, which he has commanded you. And you shall do what is right and good in the sight of the Lord, that it may go well with you, that you may go in and take possession of the good land that God swore to give to your fathers, by thrusting out all your enemies from before you, as the Lord promised. When your son asks you in time to come, what is the meaning of the testimonies and the statutes and the rules the Lord your God has commanded you? Then you shall say to your son, we were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt, and the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. And the Lord showed signs and wonders great and grievous against Egypt and against Pharaoh and all his household before our eyes. And he brought us out from there, that he might bring us in and give us the land that he swore to give to our fathers. And the Lord commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God, for our good always, that he might preserve us alive as we are this day. And it will be righteousness for us if we are careful to do this commandment before the Lord our God as he has commanded. Big rocks in this chapter are the passing on of faith. This is one we hit often. We'll talk about, the responsibility of parents to pass along faith to their children, which is enormous. But it's also for each of us as we pass faith on to another generation behind. Right? These commandments that I give you today will be on your heart, and you will live them. When will you talk about these commandments? All the time. Right? When will this influence the way that you live? All the time. When you sit down, when you rise up, when you lie down, when you walk. There's not much else outside of that. All the time. These will be with you. And then he gets to when your sons ask you, when your children ask you, what do these mean? And we go back to, we are obedient to God because we are a redeemed people. We were slaves in Pharaoh's Egypt, and God with a mighty hand delivered us. And that's why we are who we are today. It's not a stretch for us. I hope it's not a stretch for us. As we think about this and we think about handing faith on, Why is it that you do the things you do? Why is it that we live the way we live? Why are those things there? It's because God saw us and he heard our cry and he redeemed us with a mighty hand and outstretched arms. And he worked wonders and signs, and we are here because of the generation before us, because of somebody else who told us this same thing. And it's ours to move on. It's ours to keep moving on. Again, this all ties together. It's not, well, we can sit and talk about these because this is what we think. We can sit and talk about this because this is who we are and what we do. And when people ask, why is it that you live differently from the nations around you? It's because God saw us slaves and rescued us. This is so important, I hope. I think it is. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you all get this, and that's great. I don't mind telling you, when I was a lot younger, I had a lot of trouble trying to say, okay, this is what I need to do to be obedient to what God has to say. Because for some reason, and I don't blame it, there's no fault of anybody else's, it's my own, that this never clicked with me. That we're not obedient because we're afraid that God's going to strike us down if we step out of line. But that we're obedient because God saw what trouble we were in and rescued us. And now, it's to me, it's a much easier transition. They go, I do this because this is where God brought me from. Why would I not trust him to go and continue to walk? Does that make sense? I mean, it's one of those things, and I know that, like I say, y'all probably get this and probably got this a long time ago. But it's just one of those things of going, it makes it so much easier. It makes it so much better. And the motivation there to go, the God who rescued us, this is why we live this way. Why wouldn't we do what he asked if this is what he's done to bring us where we are? Which brings me to the final thing that I've got for this morning. And I don't know how many times I've read Deuteronomy 6, and I usually stop right after the Shema, right? Right after, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. You know, Jesus says, as Jesus uses these scriptures. But I may have, and maybe it's just because I've missed this, and maybe it's just a different focus. But I want to call your attention to chapter 6, verse 24. And the Lord commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God. And here it is, for our good always. For our good always. That the God who created and delivered has said, this is what I want you to do, because I want to bless you. For our good always. And we look at the Ten Commandments and we go, sure, right? Of course we wouldn't want any other gods before him. Of course we don't want to be, idolaters. Of course we want to make sure we revere God's name, right? And we look at all these things, and by the way, as we move on through Deuteronomy, all these are going to get expanded. And he's really going to explain what all of these mean in even greater detail, because it runs all the way through chapter 26. But when we live where we do, in a culture in which we do, that kind of points at the things that we believe and value and the way we want to live, and almost says, well, you're backwards. That this is one of those places of going, no, we're not. The commandments that God has given are for our good always, even if we don't like them, right? And I don't think I'm by myself when we've run into times when we thought, I wish that commandment wasn't there, right? It'd be easier on me if that wasn't there. But going, it's for our good always. Because in the end, what God wants here, what God wanted in Eden, what God wanted when he called Abraham, what we see God want in Exodus, what we see God doing at the end is God wants to live with us. And he knows, right, that this is the way. So this is for our good always. And I couple that with the section back in chapter 5 of the Lord your God is a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers to the children to the third and fourth generation, but showing steadfast love to thousands who love me and keep my commandments, because they're for your good always. And it is a humbling thing to think that as God directs us, that it's our good he's looking out for. Not just his, but it's this idea that we can be with him. That's all I've got for this morning. Let's close with a word of prayer. Father, we love you, and we are so thankful that you have redeemed us. We're thankful to be part of your family. As we remember the mighty hand and the outstretched arm, all the things that you've done for us. Father, help us to see that and keep that in the forefront. That we are obedient to you because you love us. Because it's for our good. Father, what we want most is to be your people. We want to walk closer to you today than we did yesterday. We want to be a reflection of who you are to the world around us. Please bless us in that effort. We love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.